Hello, friends. Welcome to HanChat. Today's guest is Simon Burke, a student at the University of Alberta and a local sustainability innovator in Blue Quill, which is actually the neighborhood I grew up in. This gentleman is smart, fun, and just comfortable to be around. We talked about a bunch of cool stuff, and some of the topics include local initiatives that can help combat the food crisis, the issue of policing, the controversies that surround the United Conservative Party of Alberta's recent tweets, and the question whether attention spans are getting shorter these days. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Please welcome Simon Burke.
Yeah, man, I'm into that.
Cool. So tell me more about these greenhouse projects.
Well, there's all these like sustainability programs going on, especially in Alberta right now because of climate change. Like this climate has been really hard. Like we have a very short growing season in Alberta specifically. It's like, average temperature is, around zero or freezing. I don't know. They use Fahrenheit in Hong Kong? No.
No, we use Celsius. We're better.
Yeah. Celsius everywhere but the States. It's like you have to be the stupidest country on earth to not use Celsius.
I mean, it's like metric, man. Come on.
Yeah, it's not hard. How many?
Who uses inches? It's 12 for a foot, and then how many feet for a yard? I don't even know.
I don't know. 3 feet. 3 feet to a yard.
3 feet to a yard. Who came up with that idea? 12 and 3. Oh man, count by tens. It's just easier, people. Anyway.
So there's like this big push. I mean, we had all that defund the police talk going on. I don't know if you caught much of that in Hong Kong.
A little bit, yeah. Oh, no. There's no talks of defunding the police here.
Yeah. Even here, it's like basically quashed already. Like they put I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, right?
Yeah.
Where U of A. The police budget was like $376 million for 2020, but their fiscal year starts in September. So they're due for like an 11% increase, which is 70 odd million. And they, like through all the public pressure, we got that number down to like 36 million or something, which just means the police are out in droves giving speeding tickets. I got a speeding ticket today. It's like, they're just out. They got nothing to do. There's not crime. But anyway, I spoke to the city. Like I put a little presentation together to talk to the city about ways they could actually reappropriate that money to help the communities, because the police chief went on the record and said that all the recent programs that they've put together to try to help communities and reduce crime have been only successful thanks to the communities. So like I volunteer at my community league at Blue Quill. It's like in Southeast Edmonton.
Dude, that's where I live.
At Blue Quill?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
cool.
That's why we were always at the same place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But like we're a member of the EDCF. It's like the Edmonton Community Federation.
Okay.
And there's 151 members of that community league federation. And so like I was just trying to put together, we just got a community garden for the first time this year, and it's all like, you've been to Blue Quill, it's tons of high density housing and tons of immigrant families, like from all over the place, all over Africa, all over Asia. Yeah. Korea.
This dude right here.
Hey, and this dude here too. Well, I don't know. My dad's an immigrant, so I can, I'm basically
right.
But yeah, essentially, like if we can get, I mean, we're totally volunteer run for our community garden, but if you actually were to like teach permaculture to like random, I mean, schools are going to be a disaster right away.
Yeah.
Because COVID's pretty much under control in HK, right?
No, it's not at all. The cases are still rising. It's actually in flux. Our neighbors, Macau, I don't know if you ever heard of Macau. It's like the gambling city of Asia.
Okay.
They're really close to Hong Kong. It's also on the coast of China. And it's also a specially administrative region. But Like they are able to go back and forth really freely, whereas Hong Kong, it's still very strict at the border. So if we go to mainland, then we have to quarantine for 14 days. And then if they come over to Hong Kong, they have to quarantine for 14 days. And foreigners like me are not even allowed in China, even if we have a valid visa. So it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little strict right now.
Oh, I see. Macau there, just like across the bay.
Yeah, exactly. But
Okay.
so this community garden, um, that's pretty cool. So what are you trying to aim to do with that?
So, well, right now, the thing to do is we need funding. Like, we're completely volunteer run. So, we just did a bottle drive last weekend. That was our first ever fundraising activity. And
Right.
then, so what we want to do is plan for in the spring, we'll actually
Mm.
build, like, actually go out with our shovels and build a space for the garden. Right now, the city came and dropped off like 15 plots, and I got one. I was lucky to get one of these plots because I
Mm.
know people that have been on waiting lists forever. But it's like 3 feet by 3 feet for a little grid, and then each plot is 6 of those sections. So it's actually a ton. Like if you were to do the research and like get everything in at the right time, like you could yield, like each one of those plots could yield literal tons of food each year.
Interesting.
So I'm trying to get them to let me build a greenhouse
Mm.
is through a combination of like passive solar and geothermal. Like if you were to dig down deep enough, you have the plots and you're not obstructing the sunlight. You have a reflective surface on the north wall where the sun is mostly coming through. You can just retain a ton of heat. Like you grow tomatoes year round, peppers, like squash, zucchini, like everything. And I think that's really at the root. Like when we're talking about poverty and community well-being and like reducing crime, it's like food security, right?
Right.
Because even people that don't have homes to cook in, like say you eat out 3 times a day, it's like $15 to go to McDonald's and get breakfast or A&W or Subway or wherever. I mean, it's all it's all
Right.
owned by Pepsi or Coca-Cola or whatever. But
Right.
at the community league level, because a lot of what we do is like sports programming,
Mm.
and especially this season, we're doing a lot of programming for kids. Like
Mm.
kids just come with or without their parents and do soccer drills. We teach them basketball skills, but
Cool.
we're trying to develop this program called Plots that kids can get into for community gardening.
Man, cheap labor.
Well, cheap labor indeed. It's all cheap labor. That's what this whole civilization is propped up on cheap labor.
It's true. I mean, at least kids will get an experience out of that.
Yeah, well, we'll see how the school season goes, but I'm imagining that like by mid-October, there will be
Yeah.
a lot of kids who are at home and like
Mm.
nothing to do. And I figure having them outdoors at least, we can teach them little things here and there that they
Yeah.
like, and then hopefully inspire kids. Because I mean, that's the way that change happens.
Yeah.
If you can get some kids that are inspired to like feed their whole neighborhood, I should have looked up this guy's name for. I was doing research. I listened to a bunch of your HanChats,
Oh, thank you.
much as I could. Well, I didn't want to. I didn't want to be unprepared.
Oh, yeah.
It'd
Okay.
be amazing. You had that doctor on for the first one.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
like,
Dr. Dennis Lowe. I mean, I was super nervous and awkward for that one, but he
yeah, you
was
can tell.
he was an awesome guy. Super
Yeah, well, you can
knowledgeable.
tell his work is really impressive, and
Yeah.
you can definitely tell that he made an impression on you.
Oh, yeah.
And you asked really good questions. If only the audio had worked.
Oh, did the audio fail at some point?
No, I just he keeps asking you to repeat the questions because your audio is going out. But
Oh,
obviously,
yeah, that's right.
anyway.
So
Um,
this greenhouse project that you're proposing, it really touches on this idea of sustainability, I think. And that's
yeah,
important because of this food crisis that we're kind of experiencing right now, right?
we're going to experience. Some people don't even see it coming yet.
Well,
But
maybe not in Canada, but clearly in places like China right now, with the flooding that's going on, with the major source of the imports from Kenya being devoured by these locusts. Have you seen these images? So
oh,
earlier
the
this year, locusts like
yeah,
this
BBC.
big, they've been just going around ravaging people's crops, and it's absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
And recently she declared this policy that I think it was called the clean dish policy. You're not able to, you're trying to make sure that you only eat as much as you need. So you don't order more food at restaurants. These YouTubers who are going on, or YouTubers, but on the Chinese YouTube, they go on and do these mukbangs. So have you seen these? Bunch of
No,
people.
no.
So it's like these very attractive people who go on stream like this, and then they have a bunch of food in front of them, and then devour it.
Oh,
They
just
like
to eat
this,
a ton?
like this is a small girl, maybe like 150 centimeters, devouring 2 large pizzas in one sitting.
150 centimeters?
Yeah, and she's skinny too,
Yeah,
so she
yeah.
probably works out like 4 hours, 6 hours a day, just
Oh,
to keep up
okay.
that job. But yeah, so he said that those things are illegal now because it promotes this idea that you can't uh, of
Eat
eating
more.
in excess. Yeah, exactly.
Unreal. What's next? Are they going to try to mandate the gender of the babies?
Whew. Just
Just
touching on
kidding.
all the topics here today.
They already did that.
We can
I
talk
was
about it
nervous.
later.
I was really nervous. Like when you invited me to be on the podcast, I was like, man, I don't want to get you in trouble. Like I heard horror stories, but then I watched the episode with Frankie, and you just said all the T words. So I was like, oh, okay.
Patrick, yeah. Why not, man? It's just
Yeah. Can we work them all into one sentence?
like Tianabit,
Yeah.
Tianabit one.
Yeah. Piano one bit.
Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. Tiana one bet. Yeah, there we go. So, okay. So now my question is, how does this actually address that problem of food shortage? Because we have a bunch of, well, food sustainability. So one of the biggest reasons why this is such a problem is because of food waste, right? And if you're
Yeah.
creating more food, then how are you actually solving this problem?
Well, I think what we're trying to do in my community, they're trying to get the people involved with their own food production. So I mean, it doesn't take a ton of time. Like once you have a plot, like I go water my plot every day, but like, you know, say I go do all my weeding, like that takes an hour, and you know I have to do that once a month.
Mm-hmm.
And like there are days when I'll go and it's like, oh man, the kale is really exploding. Like there's way too much kale here. I have to like trim this back, or like, oh, my basil plants are going out of control. I have to like actually take some of these plants out even. And then on those days when you have that yield, like that's just extra food you get to eat that otherwise you have to go to the store and pay $5 for a bunch of kale. So we're trying to organize like little trade parties because different people have grown different things, of course. So like every second Friday we could meet and just like do a big swap. It's like,
Interesting.
I don't know.
So it'd
It's
be
so,
self-funded? So people would come in with their own money and build their own plot? Is that
yeah,
what
like
you're
I
envisioning?
put about $100 into my plot because we just got the plots like in the middle or late June. So I had to put in mostly plants that were already plants. But like I grew all my basil from seed and it's going mad right now. Like it's taking over. I think my pumpkin might die actually
Yeah,
because
basil's really invasive.
yeah, but delicious.
But delicious. Yeah, that's true. Dude, basil fried Thai rice from Thai Express. Oh, I miss it so much.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh man.
That's all I would eat when I go to Southgate.
Oh, okay. I was at Southgate today. Man,
Nice.
I didn't know.
I'm homesick, man. I'm homesick. I'm homesick mainly because of the amount of space that's in Canada and my family and because of the food. The food just tastes different than the food here.
Yeah. More sugar and high fructose corn syrup in our food.
Love that stuff.
Just stick it to my veins.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I got so ripped, actually. It's just high fructose corn syrup all day long.
Well, I mean, you do need carbs when you're working out, man. You do. You do
Yeah.
really need that. And it keeps you going. And it keeps you going for longer and it makes you stronger. I'm trying to do that. I'm actually planning a series for the HanChat where I just say how to be sexy in 1 month. And then I'll just try to be sexy at the end of this month.
Nailed it.
Ah, yeah.
You're getting ahead of yourself. You're not supposed to be sexy until later.
No, man, I'm saying this so that I take responsibility for my own words that I release to the internet. If I don't, then then I can push myself the next time. Be like, don't embarrass yourself again. So
Well,
anyway,
your name is on it. So, I mean, HanChat. That's good. It's good marketing. Excellent marketing.
thank you, thank you.
You have to have some outrageous people on that are going to say outlandish things, like
Yeah,
the way your one friend did.
Patrick.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, Patrick. That's his name.
Hmm. So okay, I'm
Okay,
still
so
wrapping my head around this idea of a local greenhouse project making a difference for our food sustainability.
so the oldest community garden in Edmonton has actually
Yeah.
been there since the 40s. They call it a
Wow.
victory garden. Like it was something that families did when their person who was providing for them was off in the war. And it's massive at this point. Obviously, it's been growing for like 50 years, and it's really well curated. But they have like just, I mean, the side that the wind tends to come from, they have got a massive raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, all growing along there, and that's all communal. That way, people can use their plots to actually grow like their potatoes, their onions, their food that they're going to eat. But then there's a massive herb garden, and that's all communal. And
Mm.
they've got a compost thing, and that's like one of the volunteers takes care of that. Just has to be turned every once in a while or whatever. It's like
Mm.
actually a really simple thing. Like once it's in motion, it kind of just sustains itself. Well, I mean the gardeners do. Like I go to my plot every day and water it, but it takes 5 minutes.
Mm.
Um, if we had say 150, I mean Edmonton's just over a million people. We're like 1.2 million maybe now.
Yeah.
Were you born in Edmonton?
No, I was well, I moved to Edmonton when I was 3.5. So I basically grew up here. Yeah, I grew
That's
up
like
there.
basically the
Yeah.
same as me. Yeah. Like I was born in Toronto, but I grew up in Alberta all the time.
Oh, I was in Toronto for a little bit too, and then my dad's friend's startup went under, and then I moved back. We moved back to Edmonton.
Okay. Okay. Your dad's friend sounds cool.
Yeah, he lost a lot of money.
That's one way to do it. Jeez.
Well, I mean, Blue Quill is a very interesting community because there are a lot of people with gardens in their own backyard. If you look towards the 23rd Ave, but then when you go a little bit north, there are a bunch of these apartments which are really don't allow people to garden much.
And they're building more. Like I swear, I bet you probably haven't been here since they built the last stretch. Like in that field across from the LRT station.
Oh, they
Like
no, my friend, my lab manager, my ex lab manager lives there.
okay,
Yeah, she has her own garden there.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, they designed that place really well. They made it very compact. They made it vertical, like so that you save space, and then
Hmm.
they allowed people to have their own little garden space.
And then so yeah, this neighborhood's like a really good mix of high density housing and like low density suburban like houses that are way too big.
Right.
Houses where a single family lives that the Chinese government would say, no, it's too much.
What are you talking about, man? China is oh, like the amount of space between houses? Dude, China's
Yeah.
super dense in the like the mega cities like
Yeah,
Chongqing.
yeah. Like our high density, like there's some condos and apartments down here that are very dense, but then if you go into that neighborhood, like you were saying on 23rd Ave,
Hmm.
it's like you'll find a retired couple that lives in a 3,000 square foot home.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and they have their own garden and their pool and their conservative signs out on their lawn for me
Yeah,
to
you
kick over.
used to grow marijuana in their basement until, marijuana became legal and then their business went under.
They're like,
Now
what
they
are we
don't
gonna
have
do
food.
anymore? Yeah. Yeah, actually, I don't know enough drug dealers, but I would like to. I was super curious to ask drug dealers because marijuana got legal, it's been like, are we coming up on 4 years? I think it was 4 years ago in October since we
Holy
legalized.
crap, has it been that long? No, I've been away from Canada for only about 2 years.
And I think it was, okay, so yeah, it's about 3-4 years. Yeah, you're right.
I remember at that time, people were calling into CBC. They had drug dealers on the line talking about, oh, is legalization going to affect your business? And all these drug dealers were like, no, man, the legal weed stores, they don't deliver. They're like, I've got clients I've been serving for 10, 15 years. They'll never betray me to go to like some big store, buy it all, whatever. Anyway.
I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they're just, importing better. It doesn't make sense though. It seems like commercialization would really lower the price, competition. But anyway, back to this greenhouse thing.
Oh,
Let's focus, Simon. Let's focus.
Okay.
Let's focus. So what you're saying is that you have a bunch of people growing food and then distributing it to their friends and having food security.
Yeah. Like my sister has a plot at that the big community garden I was saying, that's a Victory Garden.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just met her there for a picnic a couple weeks ago, and it's like she has so much food there she can't possibly eat it all herself. So she sent us home with like, what would have been $40-$50 worth of groceries at the store. And it's just like, radishes, zucchinis, chard, kale, lettuce, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, like anything. And like all the fresh herbs, dill, rosemary, cilantro.
So do you have any interest from people who have actually lost their jobs and are really struggling financially?
I'd say probably not really. Like we haven't done a ton of marketing or anything because it's just the first year. Most of the people that have a plot are like reasonably self-sufficient anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Probably most of the people that have a community garden plot here could just put the plot in their own yard. Like they have access to that already. But we're just trying to start the program. And then I think, my vision for it anyway, is that it'll be all people from the apartment buildings and all people that like are otherwise like stressed about their food budget every month. And we can have some kind of a program. Even if kids are involved on some level, like we could do a ton of really cool stuff. I think people that grow up in Alberta, I think don't have a lot of experience with sustainability. So I don't know. I just kind of come to realize that I have some experience with this that people here don't have because of my time when I lived in Oregon. I don't know if you knew that, but
no, I didn't. That's cool.
But I went to university in Portland, or just south of Portland.
Oh yeah. And, okay.
My
very
girlfriend.
Great place, right? Very cloudy all the time.
Oh, I loved it. If it weren't in the wrong country, I would say we should all live there right now. But it's like, it's a police state quite badly right now.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
Aren't there like warlords there now?
In Seattle.
Oh, that's Seattle. Okay.
Seattle's going to be a really interesting case study in a couple of years because they really, more than anywhere else in the country, had the activists actually take over. Like they took over a little zone. It's like the police-free zone, but then they've been expanding it. And it's like, and I mean, if you've been to Seattle in the last 40 years, you've noticed that there are a ton of homeless people and there are tent cities all throughout Seattle. But there's like this, the Seattle Autonomous Zone where they, proclaim to not respect the rule of law and they will not abide by the orders of any police officers. And so police have just like, it's not worth it. It's not the hill they're going to die on. So they're not fighting with them.
No. They're not the military. They're not prepared to go in and engage with armed soldiers, armed militia.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if the Seattle Autonomous Zone is the CHAZ. I don't remember what CHAZ stands for. It's like anyway. The AZ is definitely Autonomous Zone, but it's like the Central Urban Autonomous Zone.
Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, CHAZ.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes because people already want to call the states a failed state, and they're saying that CHAZ looks to resemble kind of Stalin-esque situations where, you know, people are told how much they can eat, everybody, like they get a daily allowance or what it is, but it's like small scale communism in Seattle.
And it kind of seems like even though they're keeping police out, it's become a police state, right? People who are filming them just get beaten, and just anybody who disagrees with this movement is seen as an enemy. So they're kind of, I mean, it's kind of like an Orwellian situation there, right? You have the displacement of power, and there's someone else to fill the power vacuum. And it seems to be even worse.
Always. I have not followed that closely enough to have brought that up as though I was some kind of expert.
Oh, no, it's fine. If you don't want me to put this in the podcast, I'll keep it out.
Oh, no, you can put it in. I don't mind looking like an idiot. I wouldn't do a podcast if I was scared to look like an idiot.
Dude, I look like an idiot all the time. So high five there.
That can't be true. So sexy.
Dude, I say stupid things all the time.
Yeah, I listen to your podcast.
Oh my God. Sometimes I don't know why I said the things I said.
Oh, it's entertainment. You know, you got to give the people what they want.
Yeah, that's right. So maybe we should talk about, you know, this policing issue right now, because you kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast too.
Well, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I'm lucky that I live where I live. Like, it's not really that bad an issue for me where I live. Obviously, I'm not homeless but like, it's obvious that police are ineffective, right? Like it's like, I don't know, seems supremely obvious to me that police will always be ineffective.
What do you mean?
Like, we had when I worked retail last year, a friend of mine from Grand Prairie bought Happy Harbor Comics, which is like the comic book store that's been here for 20 years.
Yeah.
The store is called Wonderland Games that bought it, so they're calling it Wonder Harbor now, which is cool. But I'm kind of like, I was working in there, like effectively managing or whatever. And, you know, we have Free Comic Book Day is the first Saturday of every May. So we've got the ads up, you know, we're doing our marketing. We're trying to promote Free Comic Book Day. And this homeless guy comes in and he's like, "Hey, you got the free comics?" And I was like, "Oh no, sorry. That's just on Saturday. Like, we don't have free comics today, but come back the first Saturday in every May and we'll have comic books for you." And he's like, "Oh," you can tell he's kind of pissed off. And you're like, "Okay, this is fine." Like, he'll leave. And he doesn't leave. What he does is decides to rip a t-shirt off the display and run out the door. And I was the first to be like, "Okay, well, you know, what can you do? $20 shirt."
Mm-hmm.
Instead, a customer in the store, some entitled white guy, some angry entitled white guy, who are the scourge of our society right now in Canada, some angry entitled white guy, "No, not in my store," chases this guy out the door, chases him like into traffic. They're like dodging cars, get across the street to a bus stop. They're full on fist fighting each other, by which I mean this white guy is just beating the shit out of a homeless guy, because the homeless guy doesn't, like, he's not a trained fighter or anything. So luckily, an off-duty cop saw them and pulled over to help them beat the shit out of this homeless guy.
What?
So these cops show up and they come in and take a report from me. And this cop comes in all triumphantly, hands me, he's like, "Oh, I believe this is your shirt. It's like torn and there's blood on it." I was like, "Dude, just let the guy have the shirt. This meant nothing to anybody." But they're like, "Oh no, you gotta respect property." I'm like, "Well, all property is theft." So anyway, I'm like in the exact bubble where I'm like privileged enough to like call myself a communist as though that's a good thing, with no experience of communism whatsoever, because I'm privileged growing up in this capitalist society. I have access to anything I could ever want or need, but then I'm like, well, wouldn't it be better though if we could share? Anyway, it's kind of a naive perspective, but
Well, I mean, you practice it though. I think that's a big difference between you and a lot of Marxists out there. Then you have this idea of the greenhouse and about sharing your food with other people. And I think that's pretty admirable because you're trying to make a positive difference, right? The intention is there. Now,
Mhm.
damn, man, I'm sorry to hear about that homeless dude.
I don't know what happened to him. Like they took him away.
I'm sure
So
they did. I'm sure they put him in a jail cell for overnight and then slapped him on the back and said, "You're free
at
to go."
least overnight. I'm sure they didn't give him a meal.
Oh man.
I'm sure they did not. I'm sure they didn't give him any water. Anyway, I'm just drinking water, by the way,
Yeah.
if you're curious. I guess I could pretend it's booze.
I mean, if it was booze, I'd be quite impressed. That's a big bottle right there, man.
It's moonshine. All the
Oh,
time. Straight moonshine.
dude, I had to go to the hospital because of moonshine. I got alcohol poisoning from one glass. Yeah, I thought I
That's
could
not
handle it.
surprising to me. That is not surprising to me at all. I had a shot of moonshine one time at my best friend's house.
Uh-huh.
My friend, like, I was the best man at his wedding, and he'll be best man. He was best man at my wedding, and I've known him since I was a little kid. And he's a plumber, so like he works with other like journeymen and apprentices. And one of them brought him a jar of moonshine that he'd made at home. And I don't know what alcohol percentage it is. My friend confessed to me later that he has never ever drank it because he's terrified. But you know, he had me just drunk enough that he's like, "Oh, you should have a shot of this." I was flat on my ass immediately.
Oh
Like,
yeah, man.
anyway,
That's just pure alcohol, pure ethanol going down your throat. It's like
yeah,
fire.
yeah.
You feel it.
And
It's very warm as it goes down.
yeah, and you can definitely tell that it's just like pure alcohol as you're shooting it. You're like, "Oh yeah, you think I use this to clean things?"
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was so funny. I went to the hospital the night before the lockdown in Hubei, actually, when the
What?
coronavirus came out. Yeah, yeah. So I was on IV drops at the hospital. And then the day after when I came home, I was like, okay, maybe we should start planning to head back to Chongqing and then so I can go back to work in Hong Kong. Nope. They shut down the highways. They blocked it with these dirt and stones so that people couldn't get out, stopped the train stations. Full deal.
So you were stuck in Hubei?
Yeah, I was stuck in Hubei for about 2 months. And then I was stuck in Chongqing for another month before I could come back to Hong Kong.
But your wife has family in Hubei, or?
Yeah, she's from Hubei. Her family's in Lichuan, which is a small town in China. Is about 1 million people. So
I have my map up. I'm trying to keep up. But I do not know my Chinese geography very well at all.
right. I can't blame those policemen though when they came to your store. It's not like they could have really done anything to help the homeless guy, and it's not like they're just gonna give that shirt back to the homeless guy, right? It's like it's not their job.
I asked them if they were going to charge the customer with assault,
Mm-hmm.
given that he like chased him out into traffic and like punched him in the face and stuff, and they
Right.
laughed at me, which I expected. I
They
expected them.
laughed at you.
Yeah, they laughed at me. And I was like, well, shouldn't you charge the one guy with assault because he just beat up a homeless guy over a $20 shirt that nobody cares about and is now ruined?
Right.
It's like, it's just about. I
What
mean,
was their
police.
response to that? Like, what did they say anything at all? They just laughed?
They're just like, I don't remember exactly. I guess he said. I think he just said like we're doing our jobs. That's not our job. I remember him saying. And I was like, okay, cool.
That seems a little bit paternalistic. It's like
they're
they
just
know everything.
yeah. And you can't tell them anything. Yeah, they know everything. Man, oh man. Are you gonna do a cool intro for me, like before the?
Yeah, man. I'm
There's
gonna
just
do
one.
a cool intro for you. What do you want me to say?
Um, Simon Jazz Hands, Burke. No, I don't know. I don't
Jazz
know what.
hands.
Well, everybody else you've had on is like, oh, second year medical student at so and so university, and I'm like, like I guess I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a dropout, but I'm like an
Simon
English
Burke,
major.
community leader,
Yeah, community leader.
secret communist.
Secret communist, but don't tell anyone. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ashamed communist.
I think that is interesting, though. So, what's so attractive to you about communism?
Mostly just like the scourge of poverty in the capitalist system, and the mass incarceration is a huge problem. I think.
Okay,
Like
so let's
that's
talk
something.
about those two problems. So, scourge of poverty. So, what's the poverty rate in Western societies compared to communist societies?
Ooh, ooh. What is the poverty rate? Okay, I'll find my results. You find your results. We'll see who Google's better.
Oh, sure. I mean, this is why Google exists, right? In US, I guess US would be the epitome. Ooh, poverty rate in 2018 in the US was 11.8%, whereas it was 1.7% in China. But hold on. China's national poverty line is 2,300 yuan per year. So that's 460 Canadian dollars per year.
Canada's gone down. We hit 12.1% in 2015, and
But
we're
what's the
down.
poverty line for Canada?
The poverty line for Canada. I don't see it.
Let's see. Okay, so I lived in China for a little bit. So 2,300 yuan per year. Okay, so per month, that's about 200 yuan a month. Oh my God. Dude, that's nothing. That's really nothing. I go to this.
Very little.
Yeah, man, like
Okay. Whereas like our poverty line is probably
a little
closer
higher.
to, I think it's 18,000 a year, Canadian dollars.
18,000 a year. Can you live good on $18,000 a year in Canada? Like, can you get housing and stuff?
I would say no.
Okay.
Like if you're renting, like even in the smallest, like most, that's the thing, right? Is it has to do with like there's so many little ways that the capitalist system eats away at you. It's like just nickels and dimes you at every turn because that's how the system thrives. But it's like if you're renting, say a 1-bedroom suite, like $700 a month is a pretty good price. Like that's maybe the best price you'd expect. So, and then obviously that gets cheaper the further away from anything meaningful you are. So if you are willing to pay a whole bunch for your transportation, you can maybe get cheaper rent, but then it's effectively going to even out with the cost of your rent.
Right. Yeah. Monthly pass is probably like, let's round up to $100, and then rent is 700. So that's 800 a month already. So then you're left with maybe $600 a month for food and utilities and your phone bill. I mean, everybody needs a phone these days.
Yeah, you can't function in this society anymore without a phone.
No, I think like something like 90% of the world has a phone now or something. That's a statistic that I saw. Oh no, 90% have access to electricity. I think that was what it was. And 60% have a phone. But anyway, so yeah, that's not much. But what was the poverty rate with that line in mind?
12%. 12% in 2015, and it's dipped as low as 8.7, including 2018. That was the data I just was seeing.
Okay. Society's so complex, man. It's like you have to judge things on so many levels. I mean, you can argue whether freedom is a good thing or not, but generally people think that freedom is a good thing. At least some level of basic freedoms is a good thing, including the freedom of speech. You have, and capitalism is a lot that has to do. So capitalism and communism aren't the polar opposites. No,
Right.
it's capitalism and socialism that are opposites. It's democracy and communism that are the opposites. It's like the economic versus the political systems. So China also practices a capitalistic economy. Ever
Okay.
since Deng Xiaoping in the 1970s, I think they opened it up to the free market, and that's when they really started lifting their people out of poverty.
Yeah.
So it
Okay.
seems like for lifting people out of poverty, capitalism did a big part, at least for China.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because they were experiencing a rate of growth at like 7 to 8%, which is unprecedented in human history. Usually civilizations progress at a rate of 0.5 to 1.5%. 0.5%, you wouldn't see a difference across your entire generation. 1.5%, you might be a little bit wealthier than your parents, but a growth of 7 to 8%, with every decade, you're having a turnover. You're having a very significant shift, which is also why the CCP has been consolidated in their power, because people have been able to see the benefits that the CCP has provided for the people in lifting people out of poverty. But communism itself isn't, you can't say that communism is the reason for that, even in that scenario, because you see the increase in economic growth, even in countries that are democratic, like India.
Mm-hmm.
And an analysis done by, damn it, I forgot his name, but he wrote Capitalism in the 21st Century. He said that you only see this kind of growth in countries that are experiencing catch-up. So they go from a technologically naive state to a state of catching up to the technological forefront. And that's happening in Thailand right now, Vietnam, so on and so forth. So capitalism does seem to be doing good, man. It seems to be the best system we have. Sharing is a good ideology, but it doesn't promote a lot of innovation. Money is a very good incentive for innovation. And a lot of the reasons why we have, people lifted out of poverty is because you have efficient production of goods that we need. You have the efficient production of food. Food wastage is another issue, but having enough food is also another issue.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and having the systems to distribute it all. Like I used to say, like when I was a kid and I was growing up, I used to say I would probably never live to see a competent government, just because everybody always is mad at the government, and then they're like, oh, the government's gonna subsidize this or that, and the government's gonna fix everything, and it was like always kind of a hollow promise.
mm-hmm.
But then, I lived in the States when Obama was elected the first time. I was like, I've never seen people so happy, like by the hundreds. We were just like, they announced the result and it was like, you could hear everybody scream. And then we all went outside and it was like, people were all just dancing in the streets. Just like, I've never seen people so energized over politics at all.
Yeah. He promised change, right?
Yeah. And he certainly brought it about in one way or the other. But if you can look at the American economy numbers, like they're using that one particularly damning chart for Trump, just like right when the COVID, it's like steady up. He inherits a growing economy, and then it's like COVID hits, and it's like it's the largest fall since, I think it's larger than the Depression at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously that's not all. Obviously that's not all on him, but a lot of it is. A lot of it is. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Capitalism seems like the way to go. So isn't that a brave thing to say?
It is. It is. No, what do you mean? Hong Kong is the free market city of the world. It claims to have the freest market, lowest tax rates. Even
Jeez.
the public transport system is privately owned, so it's not really public.
It's like still probably smarter though, because like they're trying to, when they try to make changes to the transit here, it's like, I don't know, pulling teeth, and that every decision they make seems like the wrong one. And then they have public pressure to, have more funding for the arts. So then they give a grant to an artist who's going to install $1 million piece of art like on the LRT line, and then everybody hates it. It's like, it seems like there are a lot of good ideas, and capitalism got us to a certain point, and we're just like, we're ready to take the next step to whatever comes after. But
Who really cares that much about art on the trains? Do
yeah,
you care a lot
exactly.
about the art on trains? I don't care about the art on
No,
trains.
I care about artists, like in a free society, in a free democratic capitalist society.
Mhm.
I think it's important that children growing up can see themselves actually surviving as artists. Like there's this old trope of the starving artist, like, oh, you're going to be noble, and you're going to create art for people and be thought provoking, but you're going to struggle to eat every day. And
Right.
it's like, we accept that.
Well, I
Uh,
think it's because art is very okay. So the other comparison would be something like science and technology, where products are very scalable. You have a product, you can multiply it by millions, by billions, distribute it. You have a big market. Art, you create it once, and then where do you go, right? It's not like you can create art that can create more art.
yeah,
That's why
unless you,
typically the income levels are lower for art.
I mean, there are some weird examples of businesses that have, hired artists to do some amount of work for them, and then it becomes an ongoing thing. I'm thinking about magic cards specifically.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the smartest business model ever. They've got a generation of addicts out there who are gonna buy the product, and they rely on artists to paint
Yeah.
those cards, and that's great for the artists and for the business, but
Mhm.
not great for people at large.
I mean, it's also like Patreon, right? So because art is so non-scalable, you have to invest in the person. You have to brand yourself as the product, not your art. So then you
Yeah.
have the rise of things like Patreons. And so for people who don't know, that's a website you can go to support the artists using like a monthly support kind of thing, or a one-time donation, things like that. So
Yeah. You should start a Patreon for HanChat.
oh man, this isn't big enough and the quality isn't good enough. There's
Come
no
on,
way
man.
to pay for this stuff.
You're starting somewhere.
Also, like, this isn't my full-time gig, right? My full-time gig is biomedical scientist. So I don't really want to make money off this. What I want to do is just have some fun, get some ideas out there, and have some good conversations with people. So I'm really happy that you're doing this with me.
Oh man, it's great to see you. We miss you.
Yeah, I miss all you guys too, man. Oh, I miss going to draft and just playing Magic all the time. So good, so good time.
Yeah, well, I play Magic all the time. Has its good and bad to it.
Yeah, I stopped playing after I started playing Magic. What is it called? Arena, and
Yeah,
then it just wasn't the same. I just got turned off.
yeah. I was that same way for a long time. I was anti-arena. Thought it was killing the paper scene, and it did. It killed the paper scene. Well, I mean, the paper scene was dead when the pandemic started.
Makes
Anyway,
sense. Hmm.
but so anyway, I am on arena a lot of the time now.
Oh, good.
But oh well.
What were we talking about before that?
Sustainability.
No. Like just recently,
Um,
Hong Kong
the poverty indexes.
poverty indexes.
Oh, artists.
Artists, you're right. Yeah, you're art.
Art being
Jeez.
non-scalable.
Dude, my memory. Your memory's so good. So, what do you think about that? Like, do you think there's a way to promote art without ignoring the fact that art isn't as scalable as some of these other industries?
Well, it's an interesting question, because what we have right now is some mix of, artists surviving in the, the freelance economy, the gig economy,
Mm.
and, subsidized artists through government grants or government programs that are going to, employ artists. There's a lot of that going on right now with, well, there should be more, frankly, with our Indigenous communities in Canada since
Mm.
the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out, and it's like very obviously apparent now that it's like a systematic attempted genocide. I mean, it was obvious to most of us if we ever studied it.
Mm.
Like basic social studies in elementary school, you figured out that, oh, okay, well then the Europeans came and they tried to kill all the people and erase their culture, and it's still ongoing. And so the government's way of trying to kind of patch that is like, support Indigenous artists, support Indigenous media, and they're really not. I mean, people want more intensive social programs from the government, but what would be really great is if indigeneity had some inherent value as recognized by the capital, such that our dollars could actually translate into well-being for all those communities. Is it? I don't know.
Dude, that's actually what I was interested in. So everybody's afraid of losing culture, but culture is always changing. So when it comes to these kind of things, by supporting Indigenous art specifically over other forms of art, are you kind of shoving values down people's throats? Right?
A little bit.
If it was really good, then wouldn't people like it already? And wouldn't it self-propagate? Because when I do this HanChat thing, right?
Yeah.
If the government subsidized this and then promoted it to other people, I would feel good. But other YouTubers or podcasters would feel like, wait, hold on.
They would feel suddenly entitled to whatever amount you got.
Exactly. It's kind of like when you're in a company and somebody else gets a raise, you also want a raise, even though your salary stays the same. It's not going down.
Yeah.
Your quality of life basically stays the same. You're just missing out on an extra thing that other people are getting.
Yeah. It's like, we do that even as kids, find two twin 4-year-olds and give one of them a ball and see what the other one does. And it's like, people just want what they see.
I think that's a cognitive distortion, man. I think a lot of
distortion.
Yeah. So we have a lot of instinctual reactions to things. And a lot of the times we have to question those. One of the things is catastrophizing. So you hear a piece of news on the media and you're like, wow, the world is going to shit. And then it's like, no. I mean, if it's already on the news, it's already happened. Your life isn't worse because you learned about it.
Right. Your life is just the same as it was. Now you also know about some additional thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how much is it that, should we be supporting the Indigenous arts and communities specifically, or should we just be letting nature take its course?
Well, I would argue that there's nothing natural about the capitalist model. Like, if you want to say letting nature take its course is, allowing the free market to sort out what the real value of Indigenous art is, I would argue that probably the true inherent value of Indigenous art is something that transcends the value of capital. Because like a dollar is a dollar, right? Whereas like a human being's own learned experience and wisdom and, attempt at communication, whatever form it might be, whether it's like painting or sculpture or even drawings, you know.
Right.
People even tell the oral history. A lot of these indigenous communities are having their culture erased in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But they're starting to, like, the public schools are going to have, well, they may not now since we put in this conservative government, and they're slashing they're trying to take out public education entirely. But the public education was looking last year at bringing back Cree as a potential language to study, so you can actually read and pass down stories of tradition, like from to the next generation, so we don't lose the entire culture. But I know that's antithetical to what it is to be Canadian, because as Canadians, like, we're the great genociders. Well, maybe
I don't think anybody else. I don't think any of us are going like, let's kill the Aboriginals. Let's kill their culture.
They're
None of
in
us are saying that.
The elected officials for the United Conservative Party are saying that publicly. Openly.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, there's a guy named Kerry Diott. Jason Kenney, Jason Nixon, Adriana LaGrange, Tyler Shandro, all those guys.
What do they say specifically?
The speechwriter just said that teaching Indigenous history in public schools is a fad, and that teaching is like the blanket exercise. You know the blanket exercise?
What's the blanket exercise?
Well, I'm probably going to give a haphazard version of it. I'll see if I can find something an Indigenous person has written about what the blanket exercise is, and I'll quote from that.
Sure.
It's essentially a thing. Well, I'll wait until.
Okay.
So the blanket exercise is an interactive educational program that teaches the history of Indigenous peoples in Canada. The program was created in response to the 1996 report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples and is used as a teaching tool across Canada. So, I mean, very simply, it's like, here's your blanket, and everybody stands on their blanket, and then you get displaced from your blanket. It's like a physical exercise they have the kids do so they can understand, like, or develop some empathy or compassion for, like, this idea of loss.
Does that actually emulate loss?
Sorry? Does it emulate?
Emulate loss.
It emulates like an outrage at a lack of fairness. I don't know if you can actually impute compassion.
No. This is just way too out of my experiences.
Yeah, I don't know. The Tibetan Buddhists of the Vajrayana tradition, they say that wisdom cannot be imparted, like it can only be learned.
Interesting.
And I think there's probably some truth to that, but still, you know, our education system has to have an attempt at explaining this history.
Damn, man, but that whole thing about teaching Indigenous languages is a fad.
Yeah, it's like a pretty outrageous thing to say. You'd think if you were a politician's head speechwriter who was just put in charge of the social studies curriculum for the province of Alberta, you would know better than to say that publicly.
I mean, you know what they're doing, right? They're polarizing people so that it's easier to market to their demographic.
Yeah, it's all marketing for these people, because it's the bottom dollar is the bottom dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's really sick what they're doing, actually. Like, and it's blatantly racist. They're obviously racist, and they don't even attempt to hide it. They don't need to hide it because the news cycle is dominated by Donald Trump. As long as Donald Trump is filling the news cycle and keeping everybody's mind
How crazy is that, right? Like, we don't have many Canadian news pieces that are so interesting that people pay a lot of attention to it. Even Canadians pay more attention to American news than Canadian news.
Yeah. And I'm led to believe that it's that way all over the world. Is it that way? I haven't done a lot of traveling, but like,
what is all common all over the world?
Like, people all over, are people in Hong Kong talking about Donald Trump?
Oh, hell yeah, man.
Yeah, it's like
everybody's talking about Donald Trump. He's so crazy. He's a genius of making the news about himself. if anything else?
Yeah, I don't think it's intentional. I really do think he's just a blustering idiot. It's like you could literally put any woman in the world, you put her in that role, and she would do a better job.
Mm.
I digress.
Let's think about that statement that the UCP put out. Teaching Indigenous languages is a fad. What do they mean by that? Do they mean that it's just a transient thing? Are they depreciating the value of teaching Indigenous languages, or are they saying that the reason why people are promoting this is because a tweet went viral?
That's what they're trying to say. They're trying to have a false equivalency between like a viral trend of empathy and compassion,
which is true.
Just well, I don't think as relates to Indigenous history in Canada.
Well, I mean, there was that guy. He was like, I signed up for the U of A class, and that got on teaching Indigenous issues and history, and got tens of thousands of shares and likes.
Well, because it's a free class. Anyone in Canada can take that class. It's like free online right now. You can just do it. And so he did it, and he recommended that everybody does it. And the conservative response has been, no, fuck that. It's just a fad. Don't waste your time learning about Indigenous people. They'll be, without saying they'll be gone soon, they're saying like they'll be gone soon.
Right. So they're not addressing both sides, which is the issue.
Yeah.
How they, no matter what their intentions are, how they said it is clearly is meant to provoke. Maybe by responding to that provocation, we're doing exactly what they want.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Like what they have very finely tuned right now is the outrage machine and the polarization machine.
Mm-hmm. And
they want us all polarized and outraged all the time. And that's why the Facebook algorithm is the way it is. This is just one day ago. The guy's name is Chris Champion. He says that the blanket exercise is a brainwashing exercise.
That seems weird. I think nap time in kindergarten is a brainwashing exercise. You're forcing kids to sleep more.
Teach the kids that they're supposed to be exhausted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This time to color within the lines.
Color within the lines, yeah.
Whoa, is that not brainwashing?
It is. I mean, it is brainwashing. All education is indoctrination at some level, isn't it?
I think a lot of education these days is because the education system was founded upon creating people to work in factories, right? You have these lines of students studying the same thing. You have a certain standard that you have to meet, and then they go out into the world, work in factories, doing labor. And I think it's a little bit outdated, but it's also like change doesn't happen overnight, and there are people out there trying to advocate for change.
Yeah.
But I digress. So I think there is some truth, though, to the whole fad thing, because I always hear people being like, this is super important. This issue is super important. And then 2 weeks later, they're tweeting about like their dog or something, It's like there's no mention about that issue.
Ugh. Well, people's attention spans are as low as they've ever been, as short as they've ever been, in general.
I've been reading on this.
I do think that
seems like a myth.
Polarization going on where there's probably some subset of the population that are like, bang on with their attention span is probably better than it's ever been. But I think the majority of people that I interact with anyway, people don't even have the patience to like understand enough about COVID that they can wear a mask without questioning it.
Is that an intention thing though? Or is that like more of a identity thing?
I think it's like a cognitive skill issue, honestly.
Okay, here's an exercise. Would you agree or disagree that attentions vary by task?
Of course.
Would you disagree or agree that for a specific task over the period of a week, you might have various attentions to that task?
Of course, I would agree.
So what do you mean by attention spans are getting shorter? How do you quantify that in a study?
Yeah, how would you quantify that in a study?
Right? First, you would have to determine, you have to figure out a certain task that you're measuring the attention for.
Yeah.
And
I
then you
guess,
would have to
yeah.
do it over a long time, right?
Just to support my claim, really all I could have, like even in a perfect world where I have everything I ever want, all I could rely on seriously is anecdotal evidence. And just say,
Exactly.
well, when I go out in the world, it seems like nobody's paying attention. Nobody's even,
Right. But think about before you had this thought, was it really that different?
Yeah. I mean,
Actually, evidence in psychology these days
hard to,
suggests that attention is getting longer. We're getting
seriously.
better at multitasking. Yeah, just because we have our smartphones. The problem is that we have a lot more distractions. So it's not that our attention spans are getting shorter. It's that we have a lot of distractions. When you're doing your work, you look at your phone, you see a notification, you go to that notification, you see a comment, you go to that comment, and then you disengage from the task that you're doing for such a long time that it seems like your attention span is getting lower. But these systems are designed in order to grab your attention away from what you're doing to what they want you to look at.
Well, it's all marketing, right?
Marketing, yeah.
Yeah. Bright, shiny. I mean, even before iPhones, you could go to the mall to buy a pair of pants and see a bright colored sign. Oh, sale, peanuts, 50% off. And it's like, oh, I do need peanuts, since I'm here. So yeah, I could see that being true, that we've always done that. And now the distractions are simply what's more. I could see that being the case.
Yeah, smartphones,
But
man.
yeah, how would we design a study to quantify that?
I think there are smarter people than us working on this problem as we speak.
Sociologists. I'm sure Malcolm Gladwell has a podcast about it.
Probably.
Yeah.
I think
you listen to that Malcolm Gladwell podcast?
Wait, what is it called?
It's called Revisionist History. The popular one.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
I was going to ask you what your favorite podcasts are, because, you're doing a podcast.
David Cho, Joe Rogan. I love that guy.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And you really were like channeling Joe Rogan on the last episode with your buddy that you've known since you were a little kid.
Really?
Yeah, you sound like Joe Rogan a couple different times. You're like, I'm telling you, man, this monkey brain, this gorilla brain.
Oh. Well, I mean, one of the ways that people learn is by mimicking people who are successful. I think that's what I was doing.
Ooh. Yeah, man. And you gotta it's funny the way you take on his mannerisms. I can't do a good impression of Joe Rogan. I would if I could. Joe Rogan is hard to impersonate. He's a hard to impersonate dude, man. Seriously, Jamie, can you pull it up? Okay, sorry. What?
I wish I had a Jamie. We wouldn't have to search up our own facts.
Yeah. Yeah, Jamie, put that shit up. Put that shit up on the screen there.
I don't know what Jamie looks like, man.
Me either. What are you on about?
I probably listened to over 1,000 hours of Joe Rogan.
Wow. That's a lot. I mean, he puts out 3 episodes a week, right? And some of those are 3 hours.
Yeah, some of them are 4 hours. Did you see that recent one with David Cho?
No.
David Cho's an amazing guy, man. He's so real. He's so down to earth. He has these crazy stories, but he's super reflective. So what happens is, it's the craziest podcast I've ever heard. It's 4-hour podcast. I listened to it 3 times just because it was so good. Oh, man. That dude's lived a crazy life, man.
I've had a few Joe Rogan podcasts like that where I listened to it again. When he had Dr. Neil Tyson on, I listened to those ones.
Neil Tyson, who's that guy?
Neil deGrasse Tyson is
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Sorry, I should have said his full name. I didn't respect the Tyson.
Well, I should have recognized his name. He's one of the most popular scientists in the world.
Yeah.
I listened to a lot of it as his book, Astrophysics in a Hurry.
Yeah, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry.
Mm-hmm.
Because Astrophysics for Dummies was taken, or he has a whole speech about that. How it's not for people that are dummies. He just doesn't like calling people dummies because anybody can learn anything. But you can't learn if you think you know everything. So for People in a Hurry, I just think it's a perfect title.
That's for sure.
So yeah, I have Joe Rogan podcast flagged. Like I'll certainly see all the new episodes, but I don't always listen to it because I don't always have 3 fucking hours.
Yeah, that's true.
Get into the weeds. But
That's
who's
why
David?
David Cho is an artist. So he's the guy who designed the Facebook logo. Then he got a Facebook share stocks for it, and then he sold his stocks, and he's a millionaire.
Huh.
At a very young age. Yeah. So, but when he was like 19, I think, he went to the jungle to look for a dinosaur or something like that in the Congo. Yeah, it's crazy. And then he almost died. He had this guy who was a dick. He was eating all the rations and like pretending that David was some sort of servant of his. And then David was like going to kill him in his sleep. He talked about this on the podcast. He like had a rock in his hand over that dude's head because he thought, I'm going to die anyway. You know, I'm not going to live my final days being treated like this, because he's kind of like, he has this like ego, you know? Yeah. So, but then he's like, I'm not a murderer. And then he puts the rock down. And then the next day he's like walking around and he's like, dude, you don't even know what I was going to do to you last night.
That's intense. That's really intense.
Yeah, it's really intense. He gets into the thick of it. So he was a good friend of Anthony Bourdain. And Anthony Bourdain confided in him that he was having a lot of mental issues with his mental health 1 year prior to his unfortunate suicide. And then David blames himself a lot. You could tell just from how he talked about it. He became very emotional. It was very obvious. But he also talks about like standing up for yourself versus wisdom in terms of when people are racist towards you. Because ever since people have called it the Chinese virus, Asians have been at the short end, through the short end of the stick. And
he's still saying it. He said China. He called it the China virus yesterday. And I was like, dude, you can't do that. Like, don't call it that.
I think there's a statistic out there, and they talked about it on the podcast, that every time Donald Trump says one of these, says like Kung Flu or Chinese virus, the rates of violence against Asians spikes.
That's entirely unsurprising and very disheartening.
So if you look at a statistic like that, as a leader of the country, clearly you should just fucking control yourself.
Well, any adult. I'm happy to report I haven't heard people around in Edmonton saying it. People were saying it at the beginning, like in March. Mm-hmm. People were saying it, like professionals at my work would come in and say like, oh, I can't even say it. It's so gross.
It's gross. But even before the coronavirus too, my brother dated a white girl, and
big mistake. Oh.
And he was walking around holding her hand, and apparently some dudes were giving him the look. And I think he thinks that it's because it feels like he's taking their women. Which, number one, is racist, and number two, it's objectification of women. And
third of all, let's point out again, this is the angry entitled white people who think they own everything. It's like, because you're a white man, you own all white women, and they're not allowed to have bodily autonomy or like. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Racist ideas are like among the stupidest ideas people have ever created. And it's like, you take a second and break down any racist thing that somebody said, and like it takes less than 5 seconds to come to the conclusion that it's like completely unacceptable.
Well, that hasn't always been the case. It's because of science that we can disprove that. But for a long time, science was advocating for white superiority.
Right.
Like a lot of psychologists back in the day published papers on like There was actually a psychologist that said it's bad to mix genes between black and white people because you would be lowering the IQ pool of the world for white folks. But, you know, IQ test is inherently racist.
Yeah, exactly. But before they knew that the IQ test was inherently racist, it's like when they used to say that a glass of wine a day is good for you.
Mm.
And then they at some point somebody realized that, oh, maybe just the people who can afford to drink a glass of wine every day are like affluent enough to be healthy.
Exactly.
It's like, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people like to shit on science all the time, but I think it's also one of the ways that we can review our knowledge. One of the few ways that we can know for sure that what we said in the past was wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's Neil deGrasse Tyson's whole thing this week is he's on about, you know, or this is in his masterclass ad that I keep seeing. That's why. He says, if you can be smart enough to know something, it's another thing to be smart enough to know that you're wrong. And it's like, yeah, I mean, scientifically literate people understand what he's saying because they've had ideas that they test and then find out that they're wrong. And that's good. That's progress. That's how society learns new information. But, you know, not everybody thinks that way. How come the World Health Organization keeps changing the rules? They said the virus was this, and then they changed it and said it's this. Why don't they make up their minds?
I mean, at some level, I also agree with that too. I'm like, I mean, they're making their best judgment, but man, like, can you do it faster? Can you make up your mind faster? I'm asking for too much, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, bearing in mind that a lot of the people that have been affected by COVID-19 are, you know, doctors and healthcare workers who are, you know, dying by the thousands in the States, who completely defunded the World Health Organization because their president's a tool. It's like, anyway.
I think an organization like the WHO does need to exist because a lot of these health crises aren't defined by borders.
Yeah.
It's not like coronavirus is like, oh, okay, well, I need to get a visa in order to jump from this country to the next.
Yeah. It's like coronavirus is, you know, a product of nature, and nature has never lived by the rules the way that people are told they're supposed to.
No. How people live is very socially constructed. And unfortunately, the virus seems to be super transmissible. So the weird thing about this virus is that it seems to have come right out of the gate, having very high transmission between people, even though it had just jumped from animal to person.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit unfortunate, but there's some fortunate news too, which is that it doesn't seem to have the kind of fatality that it could have had if it was wiping. Because at the beginning of this whole epidemic, we were thinking that a lot of the people that we know are going to lose their lives because of this virus. But it seems like it's not as bad as it could have been. It's not what we were expecting.
Yeah, most of the world seems to have handled it relatively well. It's just in America right now, particularly, where it's out, like, just unleashed.
Yeah, America, India, Brazil. Those are the three that are very high right now.
Well, and India and Brazil make sense to be a huge especially, I mean, and the Indian government hasn't helped a great deal.
Really? What have they done that's different from other countries?
They locked workers in a factory. Workers were complaining that they didn't think that their employers were taking seriously the concerns of COVID and that they might get sick at work and they shouldn't have to. You know, like they're calling for something like what we got in Canada is called CERB. It's the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. Something. and it's like $2,000 a month. And if you are out of work because of COVID, or you can't go to work because of COVID, or it's not safe to work because of COVID, you can apply for it. And they basically approved 100% of the people that applied for it, like in the first few months. Now they're going back through and assessing fraudulent claims and stuff like that. But workers in India kind of raised their voice to the suggestion of something like that. And President Modi had them shut in their factories, locked workers in. So a lot of them died. And anyway.
I don't think they could do something like Serb in India. They have too many people. Their economy isn't developed enough. The government doesn't have enough money.
Government doesn't have enough money. The people aren't even organized enough.
And sanitary practices are a little bit low.
All our friends in India that watched your podcast are going to be outraged that we're talking about their country pejoratively.
I love Indians, man. I have a lot of Indian friends, which is the worst argument to have.
Oh, it's okay.
It's like people who say I have black friends, you know. So
yeah. Well, you do have black friends, though. I've seen them in pictures.
I mean, it's okay to talk about international issues, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we should do something other than criticize governments. So far we did India, the States,
Canada.
Yeah. What other governments can we criticize?
Ooh, you want to go there? You want to go to my government here?
Let's not do it. Let's not do it, man.
No, let's not do it. Man, actually, I have to go to work. So maybe we can.
Do?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, we recorded for over an hour.
Yeah, we got some good stuff.
It might take some editing to get something good out of it. I had all these books. I was going to like read quotes and cite things.
That's not how these podcasts go.
No, we were all over the place. I was like, by the time my Google results had loaded to like search a thing, we were on to another thing that I wanted to Google. So.
Oh man. Okay, well maybe you can read some of those quotes. What's the most important one that you wanted to talk about?
Well, so I was in university with Athabasca University out of Alberta, and they do everything is online. And one of my professors was uploading papers of his to this website called academia.edu. And I downloaded a couple of his papers. So I just kind of got on this mailing list. Like academia sends me probably 10 essays a week, just like grad students or professors who are publishing stuff. And it's like the algorithm knows my interests now. It was like, so I have this essay here by Pierre Kohler, who I was trying to find where he's even from. But his essay is called Asset-Centered Redistributive Policies for Sustainable Development. I was like, oh, that's right up my alley. And I've been reading it, and it's really interesting, but I don't know what kind of, I'll read you the overview for section 2 of the paper.
Sure.
So section 2 proposes an asset-centered analytical framework to clarify the role redistributive policies play in reducing or increasing inequality by redistributing income and income-generating assets in a progressive or regressive manner. It further presents stylized facts and suggestive evidence illustrating some key linkages to inequity and unsustainable development. So anyway, he's just
I'm
like
interested. So what are his ideas of why inequality exists?
Inequality of opportunity is the main thing.
Okay.
And that's really like, that's the harshest barrier for capitalism. Is like you're saying, even if the government gives grants to Indigenous artists, it's like, you need something to start with. Like, you're not creating art from nothing in the first place to like warrant being given a grant. So like even people making slightly above the poverty line might have enough resources to produce a product to say like, hey, I'm the real deal. Whereas, people that are even just like $10,000 a year less in their income don't have disposable income to pursue their own personal projects.
Oh yeah, that's a big
So-
problem.
So the inequality of opportunity is the big thing. Yeah, I don't know, human capital, wealth, include land. That's the crazy thing to me, is like when I look at the map of Hong Kong and where you are in China,
Hmm.
well, near China.
Yeah, very close. I'm like an hour away from the border.
But
No,
isn't
not
it-
even 10 minutes away from the border.
right. But I mean, depending who you ask, it might be part of China, right?
Oh, well, I mean, it is part of China, like
Okay.
legally speaking. I mean, the UK handed it over in 1997.
Right. So yeah, when I look at the map of like where you are in Hong Kong and in China, and you can see, you know, how the civilization is spread, like where the cities are, what the roads are, where the rivers are, like that's all been going on. Like that dates back thousands of years, right?
Mm.
Thousands and thousands of years, like more than twice as old as Bible people think the Earth is. It's like that's how long that civilization has been progressing. And then you look at America, and it's, I mean, not that civilization didn't exist before the Europeans came, but there's so much, like there's so much land, there's so much park space, there's so much green space. That's like, I wouldn't say like uncivilized, but it's like kind of wilder, or, you know, because the civilization, the American civilization as we know it, has really only been progressing since the start of the slave trade in 1619.
Right.
So if we can call that civilization.
Mm.
Anyway, you got to go to work.
Yeah. I mean, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. I'll do some more research before next time. We get into
Yeah.
more stuff about permaculture.
Love to, man.
The easiest thing about permaculture that people can do is actually recycle their water. Like if you own your own land, which I know very few people do, but if you own your own land, you can catch your rainwater, and you can have what's called a dry well just in your front lawn. Even you just dig and fill it with rocks, and you can filter all your wastewater through a series of cisterns that make it actually totally reusable, and you don't have to pay $100 for your water bill every month. Anyway, that's what I'm on about right now: sustainability.
That's pretty cool, man. How can people contact you about the local greenhouse project that you're working on?
I mean, people can find me on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm Simon H. Burke, but they can email me if they want. My email address is, should I do my email address?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of people listening to the podcast, so I'm sure you won't be flooded.
Yeah, for sure. If somebody listened this far and is interested, email me. I'm simonhburke@gmail.com.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Han. It's been a good Han chat.
It has. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, have fun at work. Good luck.
Thank you.
I want to hear more about your PhD next time.
Oh, okay, sure. Sounds good. I'll tell you all about how diabetes can destroy your babies. Ooh. Cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger indeed.